agroforestry in this call right now, not just people like on Zoom, but like doing it and really supporting initiatives. So, um, hi, I'm Austin Wade Smith. I'm the ED of the Regen Foundation, the nonprofit arm of Regen Network, and I'm joined by Shaila Agha below me from Regen Foundation, and a bunch of new faces. So maybe we can pass it over to you, Becca, to introduce yourself and any other Regen folks who are here.
Yeah, really great to see everyone. Uh, I'm Becca. I'm on the Regen Network team. I work on the registry and science side of things, and I feel like in the time that I've been at Regen, there have been so many different folks that have been working in and around agroforestry, but each have really butted up against all of the complexities and challenges that are really part and parcel of trying to develop any sort of ecosystem service credit or carbon credit from agroforestry projects. And for us, on kind of our knowledge side of things, it's not as strong of a space for us because we just haven't had as many methodologies come through because of those challenges. So I feel like it was about time for us to create some shared learning space to surface all of the work that's already being done and those that are keen to try to tap into that. The something that that we're constantly thinking about and building around at Regen is how to take the blockers and complexity and design for them, whether that be like technically with different like tools and infrastructure, or like build out the services that we have to support the development of not just crediting, but impact projects using our platform for lots of different ways to fund this agroforestry work, these projects. So recognizing that there's a lot to be said, I think at the high level around what current methodologies exist, what their issues are. There are a lot of different like agricultural methodologies that include agroforestry, but we just don't see as many of those projects coming up. And I'm particularly keen to hear from those that are going to share about their work, about like how they're working with local stakeholders and communities, like how that benefits framework is put into place with those communities. What are kind of the experiences, the learnings around like MRV, what's working, what's not working. I feel like policy and regulations, like those are things that are that you could do all the rest of the work well, but then have to deal with things that are kind of like outside of that world. So for today, and what we normally do with these Ecocredit Builder Labs is take the first stretch of time to have folks have kind of like a dedicated like presentation time. And then after that to pop out into breakout groups, or if we all want to kind of stick together and hear about more projects, this gets to be whatever we want and need to make it. The folks that I talked to before this that are going to share are Sev. Hi, Sev. Thank you for joining from Malaysia. That's awesome. It's super late there. So really great to hear from him about his work. I feel like I've seen the diligence and care. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And then Mike Sakra. Hey, Mike, who's been a recent connection. Super impressed with the expertise and just really like jumping into a lot of the complexities there. So would love to hear from y'all. And then, I mean, Simon put you on the spot, but would love to hear if about Econavi, and just really like y'all have done a lot of deep work with agroforestry. So I'm thinking like if we did about 10 minutes for each of you, and then if folks want to hear more, we can do whatever related to that. And then Josh, I feel like we can do Shantagar and stuff like that in maybe a breakout as well. As we go, please use chat for questions, for like things you want to dig into more, even flagging stuff for if you're hungry for like a particular topic for a breakout around agroforestry. So with that, would any three of you, oh, I'm especially putting you, Simon, on the spot, so I'll give you a second, but Mike or Sev, would you guys like to to start us off with sharing about your field work and methodology work in agroforestry? Who'd like to go first?
I'm happy to
Go
kick
ahead.
things off. Hi, everyone. Um, First, I'm super, super excited that this is happening. I feel like it's much needed just to get everyone focused in on agroforestry, and hopefully we can push something to the finish line and actually get something agroforestry specific launched. Um, so a little bit of context, I've uh, worked on a methodology for agroforestry for a while, and I'd like to kind of go over what that is. However, it's been really about like 6 months or so since I've been actively working on it. So I took a pause from really launching it to work on some other projects, and it's the foundation is there, but I feel like it needs new life to be breathed into it, and maybe some of the folks here I could collaborate with, and we could work on getting this launched. But yeah, I'll share my screen and just kind of go over the current state of the sort of version one foundational methodology and kind of the thinking behind it, because I think some of the ideas here may resonate and provide a solid approach for like how to tackle the complexity of agroforestry. So the constraints that we had here, that I tried to approach this with, was one, it needs to work with smallholder, it needs to work at small scales, it needs to work for smallholder farmers. And two, it needs to be adaptive because agroforestry looks a lot different for based on where you are in the world. Uh, and so it takes a lot of different, it looks a lot different in different places. And so it needs to it has to be a methodology that can adapt to those different contexts. So the adaptive agroforestry and smallholder stewardship credit um, is a framework to accomplish that. And the sort of core, I guess, concepts here are that it's not trying to have one way of doing things, but have a more of a spectrum where you can start small and improve over time in terms of how you're doing the MRV. And so what we've done is essentially um, broken this up into, we took some inspiration from the ERA biodiversity credit, the umbrella species, and how with this methodology they have a species guideline that is essentially attached as attachment to the main methodology. So we have like a main methodology, but then a um, biome and bioregion guideline that would attach to this main methodology and basically set the context for and sort of the lens to view this methodology through. So biomes being one lens to look at this, and then potentially getting more granular with bioregions and ecoregions. I like and have a preference towards using the One Earth framework for bioregions. I think that's a pretty great framework. So that's the one that's proposed in this methodology. But I know there's a lot of different ways to define bioregions. Um, so the those biome and bioregional guidelines could have preferred species lists. The species for that bioregion that are ideal for agroforestry and agroforestry use cases in that region. And then later on we'll look at like indicators and MRV, but if you're tracking which species are being planted, you could cross-reference that preferred species list with what's actually being planted. Other things like activity schedules, understanding the seasonality for that region, etc. So these are some of the things that can be defined in a guideline that's attached to this main methodology. But then the idea is that we're this sort of gradual way of allowing smallholder farmers to get started doing MRV and producing eco credits right away, but then have a path to improve and scale up their MRV processes over time is enabled through this concept of agroforestry points. And this point system is essentially taking the various indicators that are essentially an indicator that regenerative agroforestry is happening in some capacity, and then calculating, assigning points to each of those indicators, and then using time and space, like per hectare and per 3 months per quarter, as the final like unit and measurement, the unit of an eco credit that of these agroforestry eco credits. So it's relatively simple calculation. It's just the agroforestry points times the space times time. But then where I think this kind of adaptive system comes to really the practicality of the MRV process, it's taking sort of some key categories of that make up agroforestry and defining some indicators and activities that are uh, that would indicate that that is happening, and then defining the way that you would measure that, and then assigning some points to uh, essentially having that piece of data verified. So plan and design is one, and this is extensive. There's about like 40 or 50 indicators here, so I'm not going to go through them all, but so the categories are plan and design. If you have like the project boundaries defined, if you have a calendar of activities, um, then there's some interesting things we're thinking about with sort of expert informed. Are you working with an agroforestry expert, and maybe some on-chain asset attestations and reputation that could play a role in and kind of identifying experts that are sort of signing off on your plan and design, something like that. So these more qualitative aspects, incorporating that, I'd love to hear from Simon and EcoNavi, because I've chatted with them in the past about their more sort of qualitative approach to agroforestry. But then like species selection, native species planted, productive species, like what role they're playing, the ecological function that they're playing in the agroforestry system. Are these things defined and tracked? And like then there's different like ways to listed here that you could go about measuring and tracking those things, from using um, smartphone applications like Sylvie to um, satellite imagery to the like essentially there's a lot of indicators here, and the way that you would go about measuring them is different. They can be a simple PDF upload, or they could be running a drone and doing a drone flight, for example, and they're going to be measuring for different things. But it's like if you only have the capacity to use a smartphone app and like check off some of these indicators, that's going to give you a certain number of points. And then at the end of the day, you're calculating those based on the amount of area that you have, and then um, you've calculated that you've tracked those and measured those over the course of 3 months. At the end of those 3 months, that that number is the number of eco credits you're able to issue at the end of that 3 months is based on the number of indicators that you've been able to track. And so essentially, if you gain the capacity to start to check off more of these indicators, do a drone flight, do a eDNA tests for biodiversity, do just increase your MRV, you're going to be getting more points, and then you essentially have a max capacity of eco credits you could be issuing um, from a specific uh, plot of land. I think I'll kind of stop there. It's basically those are the core concepts, and the other there's some other pieces to this, which is like, all right, how do you actually automate all the verification of all of this and make it, because part of this constraint to make it use or applicable to smallholder farmers is that the entire eco credit issuance and origination process has to be really inexpensive. And so uh, the verification aspect also has to be automated to some capacity. And I think with the state of AI today and computer vision, and it is becoming possible to do a lot of this sort of cross-referencing um, and automating that framework. So that's an exciting piece that I think could be explored more, but I haven't it all figured out, but I just think is totally possible to do. Um, but yeah, I'll stop there.
Seb, do you mind sharing like where in the world you've been working on this? Because I feel like if you think about these different biomes and applications, it's very much place dependent. So what's informed a lot of your thinking about agroforestry? Where in the world are you working?
Yeah, so the majority of my work with agroforestry has been in Colombia, and share this as a commentable link and share this in the chat. Um, so in and around Barichara, Colombia, there are a number of syntropic agroforestry sites that I've volunteered on and spent about 6 months there volunteering and learning about agroforestry. And there was an expert in syntropic agroforestry that I learned a lot of this sort of tried to, through some language barriers, try to determine kind of how he thought about the principles of agroforestry. And then a lot of the folks here have helped contribute to this as well, to my understanding and the development of this framework. Diogo has helped a lot from Agroforestry DAO. But yeah, I would say, yeah, Colombia is where a lot of this took root, and then um, the the idea in terms of launching this is um, to test it out in like a few very different um, regions and develop bioregional guidelines for those regions. That would be really the next step for this methodology, is define bioregional guidelines for Colombia, for uh, one of the folks that I'm work with, Antonio, in Sicily, doing agroforestry, and in Sicily with olive trees and moringa trees. And um, so define a bioregional guideline for there. I think there's opportunity to just get those frameworks developed, because that's how you kind of are able to say that's how you cross-reference a lot of the indicators in the methodology. Is you need you cross-reference that with like the framework that's in the guideline, and that isn't really defined yet. That would be my next step with this, and what maybe some folks would here would be excited to work on with me.
Last question kind of from me, and then give a couple minutes for others to ask before shifting is What has struck you as the like the biggest challenges, the issues, the things that are kind of most frustrating to you about working in this space and trying to develop these projects and this methodology?
The two pieces um, that I think are most challenging here are that how do you make it adaptive? How do you contextualize agroforestry in its many forms? Um, because it just like the practices are different, the species you're using are different. It's like just it takes different shapes, and so how do you have a structured format for something that can look a lot different in different places, and without trying to just like start from scratch and develop new methodologies from every part of the world. So that I think is a challenging piece and needs more work. Um, like I said, like these bioregional guidelines, the idea is there, the concept is there, but the that hasn't actually been defined, and that's a challenge to actually tackle. And then the other is the I also mentioned the automation. Like how do you do the verification? How do you scale verification for these very diverse set of measurements that you're taking?
Totally. Thanks for sharing. That makes a lot of sense. Um, I feel like we could do two things. We could do, Austin, we could do a few questions now, or we could just save questions for a breakout. Um,
I think we
thought,
should get the discussion in the breakout as a kind of synthesis amongst all the top presentations. That way we give enough time to actually have the breakouts too, or give them some space. So I think we should keep going. But this was awesome. Thanks for sharing, Seth.
yeah, thanks, Doug. Mike, do you want to
And you can
pop?
stop sharing now because we've got this fun recursive sharing thing happening.
Yeah, hello. I'm Mike Howard. I'm here for the first time in one of these meetings, so I'm happy to be here with all of you. I'm joining in from San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, and I'm representing Sakura and also Bioflori, or also Floriviewer with Hector from Brazil, if you want to introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heitor. It's a big pleasure to be here and see so many faces working in agroforestry systems from many different countries. So I'll leave to Mike to start, but then I'll talk a little bit further. Thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah. And thank you for the presentation, Seb. That's very interesting to think about bioregional data sets of correlating like canopy height model values or different deep learning species detection to to biomass ground truth biomass carbon estimates in different types of ecosystems. So yeah, a bit of background is that Heitor and I are working together on a data um, a data platform that has use for let's see, you can see the screen now, right? Yeah. That has use for project developers, that has use for potential use for verifiers, and also for presenting the projects to buyers as well. So from the agroforestry side of things, a couple of the projects that we've worked on in the past or are working on together are let's see if you can see this here, San Pedro Cafetitlan, which is a community of coffee producers in the mountains of Oaxaca. And they are growing shade-grown coffee, right? So they're protecting the forest. That we worked with a community of about 80 families that represent about 3,000 hectares of land, but the surrounding communities are also pretty similar conditions. And we did some different forest inventories, biomass carbon analysis, also a lot of mapping with drones to look at digital terrain models to make canopy height models. Also in the future for species detection as well, trained with localized data sets to be able to categorize what species are present in a high resolution orthomosaic photo and determine the species, like a species index for the above story canopy. So yeah, they're coffee producers, and we have not developed a carbon project with them, but this is one of the goals that we have as we approach Regen Network. And one of the most interesting things for me has been like Regen Network's openness to other forms of verification and like thinking about how scientific data should be a huge portion of that, like not all of it, of course, because there's all the social aspects and all the other elements of the project, but having data accessed and reported in a way that's sort of standardized could speed up the process. So with that sort of background, because we're like, okay, should we make our own agroforestry or biomass carbon quantification methodology? It's like, okay, we prefer to like work with some of you all who are already collaborating on this and bring our sort of data and science expertise to the table in our data platform. So without further ado, I'll share a bit of that platform. So this is the Florida viewer, and this is that project that I was just mentioning in San Pedro Cafetitlan. So this is in Oaxaca. As you can see here, the mountains of Oaxaca. And these are some examples of the different data sets that we collected and the methodology that we followed. So this is the 3,000 hectare area, and this is generated, once it loads here, this is generated from a RGB drone. Yeah, the quality should be a bit better, but then across the entire area, we took, let me load it in here. Across the entire area, we took different forest plots. And within the plots, we marked the DBH and we marked the species of the trees, right? So we get a biomass carbon estimate correlating to allometric equations within all of these plots here. And then also what BioFloaty is doing is advancing that with correlating it directly to terrestrial LiDAR scans, like high quality terrestrial LiDAR scans, where you're just getting the volume of the wood instead of using allometric equations to estimate the carbon content. So this is also part of the methodology that we have used before. And then, so we can also look at different satellite data layers. Like this is a canopy height model, 1 meter by 1 meter pixels, which is not fully filled in many areas across the world, but it's the data set from Meta. And we took, with drone aerial LiDAR, we scanned different portions of the forest, like I said, where we had those plots, and we were able to estimate the tree height across all of the area that we flew with the LiDAR. And then we're able to correlate those data sets. You know, we use the plot data sets to get the carbon, to extrapolate across the drone LiDAR data. And then from the drone LiDAR data, we can extrapolate across the entire satellite data, looking at the difference in, let's see here. Yeah. Yeah, so that's essentially the workflow of the methodology. And the point to make here is that like this platform, it's going to be a lot more user-friendly in about 6 months. And it is designed to help with that workflow, right? To take even the original images, produce orthomosaics and point clouds from those images, take the LiDAR data, do the normalization of the LiDAR data, take the canopy height model data, and then we can extrapolate that canopy height model data out as carbon values by correlating it to regionalized data sets, like I was mentioning before. So yeah, we see a great potential for this to be used for verification purposes as well. Creating data reports showing uncertainty in all the different data sets that were used, things like this.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So just to complement, I'll be sharing my screen here also. Oh, my battery is almost finished. I'm gonna try to be quick here.
I'll take over if I need to.
Yeah, do I have time to get my charger? But I'll be
Yeah,
quick.
let me share something else. Yeah, so just to give an example of some of the other use cases of the Flory Viewer data platform. Here, for example, is visualizing LiDAR data sets to look at tree height. Here is really interesting. Some of the work that's being done is very cutting edge in segmenting individual tree canopy from RGB, high resolution RGB, and then based on like deep learning algorithm, like what each little section that's segmented looks like, categorizing into different numbers of species and getting sort of like this species index mosaic across the mapped area. And then at the point that it's at now, it's like the user has to come in and manually look at what was categorized and determine like, okay, this was this species, this is this species, and this is this species. And it's like, okay, we can envision this sort of larger open source data set where people are inputting, doing projects and then inputting their own localized correlations between what species are there and also the correlations to the biomass carbon. We're saying. Yeah, land use classification, satellite data. Here's sort of the visualization of that. So, right, looking at the high resolution singular image, then looking at the drone mapped entire area, then going to the satellite scale is the ideal.
Yeah, let me share the screen now, Mike. I think I got. Okay, so I think it's very complementary what Sev has just said in his presentation here. So we strongly believe that we need people to build their modules, right? We want to be able to have one company or just a few companies building modules for such a heterogeneous reforestation systems. So our idea here is to provide the tools that people can raise the bar and like go from field measurements to drone images and then use these deep learning tools that they can estimate and build like site-specific modules because we're talking about small scale reforestation that is very spread out, right? It's not really large areas reforestation, so we can use like very regional and generalized modules. So we're working on this approach of combining field measurements with remote sensing metrics such as vegetation height from LiDAR or from RGB images. And then so people can upload this data and train their deep learning modules to estimate above ground carbon stock, for example. And here we can also use, if the project has the resources needed for terrestrial LiDAR, which we can build allometric equations, extract the volume of the trees from these high density point clouds. And we don't need in this case to use diameter and height, and then use a general allometric equation to estimate above ground carbon map. So it's all about the level of uncertainty that we want to achieve, or the project is able to achieve. That's why, like Sev said, there's no one methodology because it depends on the resources, the situation in the field also, right? And here we are also working on the species detection. Of course, we cannot build those libraries of crown libraries for all the tree species, but we can start developing for some tree species, such as invasive species or some endangered tree species, or species that can indicate ecosystem health, for example, right? And we're using here an approach that people can also use. Of course, they need a specific drone for this to have this zoom images where we can classify, and we don't need to really georeference the trees because we can take these images with the geolocation. The botanist can work from the lab, right, and identify the tree species. And here, finally, we are also working on this canopy species diversity index. So we cannot be sure like which tree species, but we can be sure about how many tree species, a proxy of there has been a gain in terms of species canopy diversity. So nowadays we have algorithms that can automatically segment the tree crowns, like this one here we did in this Atlantic forest region. And then we can start using a very fancy approach of deep clustering, where we can clusterize the tree species into different classes. And we can estimate how many classes of crowns, of tree species we have. So that's a very good proxy of the canopy species diversity. And here is just morpho species, right? We don't know the name of the species, but we know how many should be in that image. And yeah, that's it. It's just
Yeah,
a
to
little
emphasize the
example.
idea of like, in some cases, this type of really high quality data set can make other estimates of carbon and species diversity for lower costs, in the surrounding areas much more accurate, right? Like it's not like the idea is to, like you guys are saying, empower the project development like from the ground up, and these high quality data sets and tools can sort of streamline that process. And we really want to collaborate with those out there that are developing the methodologies and projects, and yeah, develop the, kind of share what you guys think about this and what you see that it could become. So
And thanks for sharing all, but it's I was privy to a bit of that before, but it's always nice to like pull back more layers and learn and think about how it can apply and how it syncs up with the work that you've done, Sev. So I'd love to give Simon and Marcelo an opportunity to share from EcoNavi for let's say like 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can go into breakouts from there. There have been a lot of questions, Mike and Hitor, in the chat. So if you guys want to hit those up. And yeah, Simon and Marcelo, love to hear what EcoNavi has to say.
Hi, Becca. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here and to see you all. It's been a little while, and I am winging it, and I hope I can keep the bar high after the comprehensive and rigorous presentations, Sev, Sunflower Tech, and from Mike and Heitor. But just to say, I might be able to bring a little bit of insight from our experience of the past months, and why not? I'll see if I can. Yeah, here I can share a screen. Um, for those of you that are that don't know us, real quick, we created a platform, Econavi, that's mapping and supporting regenerative projects primarily in Brazil and with agroforestry. And we use blockchain technology to reports data to try and open new sources of revenue and transaction possibilities for land stewards and ultimately to mint tokens, tokenize and exchange the impact data that's produced from this. So we're just about to, pretty soon, we're going to hit the 800th field project that's joined the platform. So that's, agroforestry farms, urban gardens, indigenous communities, quilombos, and so on. We have a steady, pretty much daily stream of reporting, voluntary reporting from this community, which you can see on the website. And let me just see. I took some notes while others were speaking. Yeah, I guess in the past few months, our focus has been a lot on really, I guess, within Brazil, the Brazilian sector, and somewhat independent of the Web3 community and tech communities specifically. So yeah, sorry for not being around so much. But over this time, we've been able to teach farmers tools for opening Web3 wallets and how they can leverage this technology. Some of it's supported by Regen, for which we are very much grateful. And when it comes to methodology, making credits and having it validated, and there is ultimately a market logic that cannot be denied. We have found, at least in our Brazilian context, something, dare I say, useful. It enables fluidity. It's a methodology called ISSB, which is the International Sustainability Standard Boards, and it enables basically let's say a valuation and translation of impact data into some kind of financial disclosure. It's recognized currently by 5 countries, one of which is Brazil. So, Heitor, if you haven't heard of it, maybe could be of interest. Right now, there's Brazil, Costa Rica, Turkey, Thailand, and South Africa. However, it is being increasingly considered, namely in Africa, in the European Union and other countries of Latin America. So, as this could be of interest for a number of your projects based depending on your regions, because you want to make sure that you're compliant, eventually get an audit, but it allows you to streamline with your communities to get them to do work that can then be, without too much difficulty, translated into a bureaucratic lingo and then be validated for credits and recognized on a, dare I say, sovereign level. Then furthermore, at least for Econavi's activities, so we've developed this methodology with ISSB. We've signed our first B2B contract for voluntary offsetting with a chain of eco-conscious luxury hotels in Brazil. So this will be a way for us to engage with our community of land stewards to report data and also provide how would you call this? Like tangible compensations, so regenerative goods or services to the patrons of the hotels who are paying a mandatory carbon tax that we've developed with them. And I guess the culmination of recent activities, we won a hackathon organized by the Brazilian Central Bank for nature-based solution, like tech towards nature-based solutions. and we created a demo, basically a platform to mint and trade tokens that are based on verified impact data. We've created this software basically that works on a low bandwidth. So even in the deep in rural Brazil, farmers, even the majority of whom also have smartphones, are able themselves to connect and provide their reporting. And so this was a major advancement for us, and a good milestone to see that there's also the traditional institutions are finding interest in the kind of work that we're doing and that people in this call are doing as well. And I guess as we're moving forward, we're making some progress with outreach in the Amazon region, which is a little bit less, let's say, developed for Econavi. Most of our community is in the Atlantic region on the coast, where most Brazilian population is as well. Also, maybe on a more human level, our team, which has grown a bit, is also spending more time in the field. So this was, for example, something very important to Breno, who's the another founder and CEO, but he's ultimately an agroforester. So the fact that he's able to dedicate more time to planting, to participating in community activities, and not being on the computer, it's good for his soul, and it's good for everyone else involved. And we'd also, continue. Our team has grown and has more agroforesters in that team. And I guess, ultimately, before I let Marcelo share a couple of words, who has joined the team a year ago and will be able to speak more of what's happening in Brazil, since I'm the one member not there, that, I guess there are these ongoing challenges of finding the right balance between the scientific rigor and the verification, having, for example, third parties auditing, but then also at the same time getting field action rolling, with the support of initiatives like ours and others here. And just one example I'll share, and it's an open question of whether it can be replicated on a digital on Web3 or even just online. They have in Brazil a thing called Sistemas Participativos de Garantia, which is basically regional-based collective initiatives for mutual verification to then provide a stamp, say, of approval for example, good practices. If something's organic, these are for groups and land stewards that don't have access to, formal certification from like a state body or from something that is out of reach. So I guess I'll leave it at that. And I'm going to stop sharing. And if Marcelo has anything to add from reporting from Brazil, uh, please share.
I would try to be quickly in my sharing. Basically, we talk about our framework for reporting data. One of the context, the background of me and my partner Verber joining Econavi was a hackathon organized by the Brazilian government to tokenize Brazilian bonds. And one of the tracks was regarding the sovereign sustainable bonds from Brazil. Brazil experimented with minting those bonds to fund regenerative practices in Brazil. And our main goal by the time was to have a way to not only tokenize the full structure, but also to rank the assets, the sustainable assets. So we ended up winning 2 of the 5 tracks of the hackathon, one in the interoperability and the other one in the thesis for the framework for ranking the assets. And that's when we joined Econavi with that same idea to plug a very finance high finance oriented framework into a very field-related, field-oriented platform. So the idea was to bridge the gap between what we talked here earlier, the idea of real field work with translated into finance, sustainable impact, etc. The framework we used was the ISSB. Basically, the IFRS 1 and 2, they are like 100% target for companies, for big companies, for even countries, etc. So what we did was to humanize the framework in a way that even smallholder farmers can provide data and in any way they want. Like today, Econavi, it's pretty much about like seeing each other's pictures and knowing where they are and if we need to visit the place you go. So the farmers will just like upload the data as they do today. The main difference is that they will add like a couple of numbers on how they implement the projects, and then automatically it is processed and turned into the information that will feed the financial assets. Namely, we can call it like a token, an NFT. We are still debating what will be. But basically, like we choose the ISSB, IFRS 1 and 2, mostly because it covers more than 80% of the financial markets. So if your framework, if your assets are under this framework, it means that you have access to and if you aim to launch it in the global financial markets or like DeFi, it means that you have legal access to 80% of the global financial markets. That's our strategy, to have like farmers reporting data in a way that is like very inclusive for them. As Simon said, like the platform, the website is very simple. The design is like super light, and we intend to make it like even lighter for other places in the world. And like the reporting is easy, and right now we are testing with the first B2B contract. So thank you. And if you want to talk about reporting frameworks or how to rank impact assets, reach out to us.
Y'all aren't busy at all. It's so great to hear all of the work that you all have been doing. Congratulations on the hackathon and all that. That's really well deserved. So for the time that remains, I think it would be great to get everybody that's interested in digging more into just specifics on agroforestry. It sounds like there's some like major collaborative opportunities. So we'll have one breakout for like the agroforestry folks that want to dig in deeper. And then I'll hang back in the main room for folks that want to just ask more high-level questions about Regen, about agroforestry that aren't quite ready to dig into too deeply. So I will make one room, let participants choose. Yeah, Marcella, what's up?
No, just one question regarding the document about like the whole region, the future region structure. One thing that I missed there, it's exactly what I told about, like how do we rank the assets and how do we price them? Because we can, like, part of the price comes from the cost, and another price comes from like the quality of the assets. So I would be very interested in like reading or watching some content about how Regen is planning to solve this.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's definitely something that comes up in a lot of the different, with a lot of the different methodologies that are under development with each of these indicators and sectors. So noted, it's a good point.
I mean, I think that's something that we can unpack a bit in the focus session in agroforestry as a prompt, because this is something that was sort of outlined in Sev's methodology too, around the scoring system and how do you structure its value. Certainly the kind of like recuperating cost versus proposing this is ecosystem services or bringing value are both ways of defining an evaluation, but there isn't consensus around what's the best way to do that. So it would be fun to dive into that.
So the breakout room's open. If you go into that bottom bar and hit breakout rooms or hit more and go to breakout rooms, you can hop into the deeper session. I named it Deeper Agroforestry. And then anybody who wants to stay put in the main room, then just stay put.
I will head to the deeper session and maybe another Regen rep. Perhaps Giselle, if you are going to hang on the call, want to join there too? No pressure.
In the Agroforestry one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not finding the room. Was it?
It's under more breakouts.
Okay. Got it. Go ahead.
CN.
Nice. Everybody's finding their way. Well, those that are sticking around in here, this can be whatever it needs to be. If folks have like questions or want to share more, I just recognize that already just in this room, we've got a lot of different hats. So happy for this to be whatever it needs to be, whatever on folks' mind.
First of all, it's nice to see all of you, and
Yeah.
I I haven't been as present of late, so it's refreshing to see you, Shyla, you, Becca, Howard, and yeah, happy to be here. I might have also a question or two, but we'll let everything flow first.
Yeah. What are folks thinking about, agroforestry related or otherwise?
I guess I was interested in learning more. I'm sorry, my name's Jens and I'm in Colorado. And
Again, good to have you.
I work with, I volunteer my time with the Wind River Tribal Buffalo Initiative. And I've been talking to them off and on about biodiversity credits and different ways of funding their buffalo rewilding effort, which is probably almost look at as a keystone species in a broader or ecology effort across their across many domains, our lands in Wyoming, central Wyoming. So one thing that I guess that has been popping up a lot for me is trying to better understand kind of the integration points between maybe any kind of agricultural effort, but maybe more ideally agroforestry or anything like that, with rewilding, with more traditional areas when we talk about bioregionalism. And even just the term bioregionalism, when you talk about trying, like Samantha's effort with the BioFi effort, how do you define, what's the appropriate level of defining a ecoregion, and what are the edge points, and how do we, what comes to mind when we think about transitions between agriculture and more wildland for rewilding? And I guess I'm kind of in looking at the touch points between those high level categories Austin was talking about at the beginning of the session. So yeah, I haven't found any kind of answers in this space, and maybe it's a little early to be even asking the question, but I thought this would be a good group to bring it up with, if folks had any experience or thoughts about that question.
Well, I know that Howard, Simon, and Shayla do, and it's been interesting to see that question play out in lots of different contexts with the groups that we've worked with. But I'll let others share their thoughts first.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So nice to be here. So nice to see you again, Howard and Simon, and all new faces. Thanks for joining, Emil. I only saw you on email, so welcome. I think for me, this is a question actually, Jens, that I've been, I actually asked on the BioFi group when I was joining, because it's something that's so, it's so alive for me. And in a lot of the communities that I'm working with here, it's, they cross the county boundaries that are already set, the geographic boundaries that are set. There's one community in particular which is towards the border of Kenya and Tanzania, and they are basically it's I think 23,000 hectares along a mountain, and on one side it's Tanzania and on one side it's Kenya, And it's a dicey situation because there's elephants that cross over from Tanzania to Kenya, and they're causing a lot of damage, and no one knows who should be responsible for it. But at the end of the day, it's the Maasai community that's has freely roamed through both sides, and in fact, they never get asked at anything. They don't have any kind of immigration control. They just walk through. Because right now in Kenya or Tanzania, nobody's going to stop them because like traditionally they've just been moving past and past. So for me, my answer, just from my experience, is a little bit about culture. Like, what does that mountain mean to those people in that area? Who's it serving? Is that one bioregion? Because I feel like that is a bioregion in itself. It's who's affected if anything happens to that bioregion. The water tower is serving these people, and there is this geographical boundary of this mountain and the sacredness of the mountain. So I think that's kind of like an easy one for me with my experience. But I think culture, language, traditions, that's kind of one of the things that I would point to.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, I was going to point in the direction of the Regenerate Cascadia group that covers British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and maybe parts of Northern California. And there's been going on now for a year and a half, a very active mapping movement, a subgroup within this network of regeneration-minded organizations. There are folks using GIS and cultural information and really trying to, on a regional map, do bioregional mapping. And that may be a model because it's part of that group. And forgive me, I'm not remembering the name of the author and the original leader who had spawned some of this work. But in any event, I would point to that, and I can get you the contact information of the staff for that group that's coordinating the effort. And it would certainly, in the Rocky Mountain region, I believe there's work ongoing and plugging it in and following the model because it's pretty advanced here. I think it's close to yielding results.
That sounds wonderful, Howard. I just Googled Regen Cascadia and got something about trucks trying to regenerate. So maybe if you do have any pointer to that project, that would be great. Appreciate it. And
Sure.
it
Because
also
there's a
seems like
working group on task for what you're envisioning to really do it systematically and democratically and smartly.
but also a ecoregion with many of the similar challenges we have in Wyoming as well. So yeah, thank you for anything you can. Would you send that on to me on email or follow up on, or would it be in the chat here?
Yeah, why don't you get me your email in the chat and
Okay.
I'll send you a connection.
Thank you, Howard.
It's really interesting to think about, and I'm familiar with the context in the West because we have a few folks, in our community that are actively working on various projects for rewilding in buffalo. Maybe it's the same. And I'm really struck actually with some of the non-region work that I'm doing here around which is very much related to what Howard and Shayla have shared, where the arbitrary boundaries that we have set up, national parks and, geographies like that, they feel safe for people because they're just clear, demarcations. But something that we've been talking a lot about in some local convenings here around the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which is the most visited national park in the whole world. And you get just like you have so many different interaction moments with people, and you have these really fragile ecosystems and wildlife. And we're trying to extend the definition of the park and extend the ecozone so that people start to see the bioregion as just like the ecosystem like the park, that the park is, is arbitrary. So I think it's funny. It's like somewhat psychological. It's somewhat based on just like who are the communities that are involved and impacted around this kind of shared, more like a shared ecosystem. I'm also reminded of reading a really interesting book about around Greater Yellowstone and their really, really significant struggle over the years to really define that bioregion based off of wildlife, like based off of the habitat requirements of the species there. And then all of a sudden that blows everyone's mind because the habitat requirements for these species just are not, they take over every, like the buffalo roamed across most of the country, but something that a tool that I have used that has been helpful is using prosocial as a framework for a group of people with very different expectations and needs to walk through a certain process to define a bioregion themselves. And so I found the prosocial framework to be really helpful in making people feel heard, but actually productively coming to kind of a conclusion, or at least an iterative, understanding.
And is that like the pro-social behavior? Is that what I see when I Google search pro-social? Is that an
Yeah.
actual digital platform, or are you just talking about that behavior like as defined by Wikipedia?
So look up Eleanor Ostrom. So it's kind of a commenting, like principles of how she did this research over looking at how communities, like particularly indigenous communities, how they govern and make decisions, and that have been successful for millennia, and looked at what was in common among them all. And then what has come from that is kind of a pro-social movement. But there's also a book called Pro-Social that I highly recommend. And it really like surfaces a lot of tension points in I've found a really healthy way.
Well, thank you for mentioning Greater Yellowstone. I was actually going to bring that up on you as an example of what you were talking about, a larger view of a smaller national park.
Yeah, I mean, the Amazon is another, meta example of it's hugely complex. To think about a whole region with multiple countries and lots of different, even lots of different ecosystems within that larger bioregion. And it's very, very complicated. Curious to hear what others, yeah.
Go ahead. I don't want to take all the time either if there's other questions, so I can come back to my follow-up question.
I'm good with anything. What are others got going on?
I have a short, very logistical, non-content oriented question. Sheila and Becca, and I I am asking for like the 90-second answer, or maybe even shorter. So I'm here mostly so I work in climate finance, but I'm here as an interpreter for a Romanian speaking developer who's trying to develop a bunch of this stuff there. And then he is interested just finding a lot of value in the Regen Network, and I think is confused because there's a lot of prongs of a lot of things that do a lot of things. So I guess the question is like, what is a good centralized place to find the best ways to navigate the human and intellectual resources of the organization? I know there's a website, but like frankly, I don't think he needs like the innards of how blockchain works. He's like a developer who wants to sort of like bring money to a place. So is basically monthly calls of this sort, is that where to meet people, or is this not the network for him, or is there some other meeting forum where he should be talking to people?
And you said he's a developer? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, so basically he's got a bunch of relationships with peasants, and then he's in the government, and basically has sort of like the organizational as well as street cred to make things happen, and just there's nothing happening in Romania, so he just wants to connect to other groups.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, this call was created to support people like him, to come in and make sense of a complicated space. Blockchain, Web3, all of that aside, it's still a very complicated space. So I would say the Ecocredit Builder call as an entry point. The other would be we have developed the Regen Registry website as just a place for just looking at what it takes to develop eco-credits and utilize the platform. So there you can actually look at existing credit protocols. So I feel like those are two good options to get his feet wet. And on the Regen Registry website, it has a support section. So he can seek out that support section, which talks about this call, and then another platform that we use kind of in between time.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I see the white paper. Is that the white paper? Are there multiple white papers or a white paper section to point to? And second is how to find the Eco Credit Builders call.
Yeah, so this is the place for all the things. I would not direct him to the white paper. It's a lot. And it's very heavy blockchain. And it also doesn't speak much to eco credits and the concept of just funding regeneration in that way. So I would send him to the Get Support page on the Regen Registry website. He can register for this call. He can hop onto Hilo, our community platform, and introduce himself and meet other people. And he can check out existing credit protocols. The effort to demystify and clarify the different prongs of Regen, as you put it, is weighs heavily on us, and that's why we developed just this distinct Regen Registry website to help unblock that in the meantime. But there are more, there's more underway. We see that as a huge pain point in the whole space, and blockchain does not always help that situation.
And I think we're on an email thread as well, Emil. So you can always shoot your questions there. And I'm on the thread too. I can help you in terms of community partnerships and what you can do on the ground. The foundation can really assist you with ideas or kind of just give you like some of the precedent of the stuff that we already have working. And yeah, we can have a conversation on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I feel the defensive need to say he's a smart, very technically oriented dude, so he can handle all of the blockchain stuff. I just see that the time is limited, and then there's like very real people who have like real projects going. So I think it's less like conceptual foundational stuff and more like, okay, what are the networks to leverage? So thank you for the organizing information. I'll send that to him, and then we'll follow up.
Yeah,
Thanks.
totally. That sounds great.
More than 90 seconds, but I'm grateful.
Can I jump in? Becca, you know me. I come from the climate finance angle as well. I'm trying to grapple with obviously all the great stuff that you're doing, and would like to find. I wonder if we could not create a subgroup, or at least just know who on the call is interested in the ISSB disclosure standards that Marcelo mentioned earlier, the investor lens on how to incorporate blockchain credits, these kind of things. Yeah.
I feel like having a dedicated builder lab for that side of things could be really interesting. Especially if a few like you and a few others could like share about the work that you do, the opportunities and challenges that you see. Because I do feel like it's kind of speaking to Emil's point where it's like folks are busy on the ground. How can we leverage that knowledge and figure out what connections and opportunities there are? Does that sound of interest?
Amazing. I would love that. I would, really love that. Yeah.
Let's do it. The session in March, we're going to have this awesome verifier come and share kind of the verification perspective and have a nice Q&A about verification. So perhaps the month after that, we can convene if there are others that you think would be good to join. I think that would be awesome. That's a big area of need.
Yeah, it's a big area of need, and I can see how you could, in the same way that for the labeled debt market, you seek to activate different parts of the sustainable investment value chain, you would want to do the same for these biocredits, and but how they are incorporated into investment portfolios is something that we'd want to address. And it was great to hear that Econavi is looking at disclosure standards, but then we start speaking the same language. But I'm gonna stick around. Don't you bet. Don't worry, I'm not giving up.
It might suggest, and I'll just one little thing, it might be worthwhile that Regen or one of us creates on high-low a subgroup for discussion around markets and climate finance disclosures, because that will be beneficial to everybody. I mean, it is we're driven by the environment, but we also have to be financially sustainable. So for all the projects around it could be very valuable.
Consider it done. I feel like there have been a lot of folks, I feel like over time in the investment space, or people kind of in between trying to connect, that have found it challenging. And our buyer model to date has not really encompassed that as much. So I think that would be awesome.
Great.
All right, I am going to bring everybody back. If folks have burning questions that we want to dig into for the last 5, go ahead and put them into chat. But I feel like this was an awesome and although brief, because normally we have more time to discuss. So thanks for jumping right in. Broadcasting message. Right. And something, Constance and Simon, to think about, if we could organize such a thing a lot of different ways. Like it could be a couple people sharing about their work. It could be just kind of one person speaking to the larger space, because there is a context gap. Even myself, I'm not hugely literate on the financial side of things. So we could even have a separate 30-minute chat about how to organize something, but we have plenty of time. So.
Yeah, I'm open to that. Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right, they're making their way back. And on that note, there's someone who has reached out and is trying to kind of engage with us from a UK-based company called Kana, and they work on like high impact natural capital investment portfolios. And I feel like they're in my view, I kind of see like just a lot of different gaps being filled, by folks that are they're trying to figure out how to do what you're describing, Constance, is like connecting these real projects on the ground with these different financial opportunities that are kind of eager to support these kinds of projects. And then the regen piece that we hold is that we can help build work on the infrastructure layer, the agreements, or like pre-finance credits, the different instruments and infrastructure that can make these things move. Hey, everyone. You guys figure it all out? Is it just all figured out? It's done.
I think we uncovered a couple like universal paradoxes that are incredibly difficult. But I feel like with the collective dedication, care, and intelligence in this room that we can progress forward, even though some of these things are incredibly challenging. We spoke a bit about like divergent incentives and how to map the sort of scale of like large scale systemic impact and data aggregation as big data, and how it relates to local holders, local farmers, how they're in the loop, and the sort of diverging incentives that happen there, and what is the potential for distributed processes of verification or progressive processes of verification to support that and how that's laid out in the methodology. I thought that was really, really interesting. Marcelo, you just want to say it out into the space rather than just do it into the chat?
Oh, yes, like I think like we are everyone here asking like amazing questions to each other, and the answer was always like, right now I don't have the answer. And like this is just amazing, because usually what like one of the recipes to fail, it's when someone or everyone have like just a perfect recipe for the problem.
Like, I got it figured out. Yeah.
Yes.
You're
yes.
in good company. Well, and to that end, Jans had a really great question prompt for our group, which was this kind of struggle around defining a bioregion that I felt like was just very relevant to agroforestry and then this broader space. And then we were talking with Constance and Simon about having a follow-up EBL that's looking more specifically at climate finance and kind of the investor finance side of things, create some learning and open up some opportunities to explore in a next EBL. So that was a wonderful 30 minutes.
I think we also kind of touched on that, because we were thinking about how to link a little bit the claims and all this collection of data with what the funders or the investors would be interested. So that's still something that we really need to carve out. We really need to understand in order to create something that is truly valuable, so that the reports are meaningful for the ones that are going to be investing in the projects. So
I feel like with the number of projects and quality of projects that attended this call and future calls, if there was a sense of consensus around like what was a shared approach that people felt like maximized interoperability and integrity, that could be a big force to put pressure on a particular approach to be adopted. So like I want to put that agency within this room right now, that there's enough really high integrity and high quality projects that if we coordinate this, I think that can have a significant impact. The caliber of the conversation today was awesome. I'm super appreciative. So thanks everyone.
And as a final note, for engaging in the in-between times, in between the Ecocredit Builder calls, we have the Hilo group we don't have as many of the smaller output groups, but if you want to connect, I think a lot of folks that are just on this call are already on there. So pinging each other, we could have even a follow-up EBL, get some more agroforestry folks presenting and continue to dig and learn. So feel free to use that space. But I really appreciate like time, attention, thoughtfulness, all the work that's being done. This is just like why we're all here. So thank you, Seb, for staying up late. Like, get some good sleep. You deserved it.
Appreciate you
Nowhere
all.
else I'd rather be.
Everybody. Thanks.
Right on. See ya.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
All right.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.